Hello, everybody. I am very happy to be here today with Marylee Hardenbergh, who is based in Minneapolis and has such a rich background as a movement therapist and as a choreographer and as a healer. So, we are here today to talk about touch and movement and dance. But before we start in, Marylee, before we jump in, Marylee, is there something that you want to say about yourself or already as a way to introduce the topic?
Um, I no, other than I became a dance therapist in my 20s. Um, and so I've been practicing dance therapy for quite a while, and I believe that is what allowed me to have the sensitivity I do when choreographing, where I really care about the audience. I want to make sure the audience can see the performance and hear the music. And to me, my intention is what is the audience going to receive from this performance? So I feel like that has to do coming out of the therapeutic model.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And do you use touch a lot in your either in your choreography or when you teach movement classes and workshops?
Okay, so I mm, that's interesting. I don't use a lot of touch in my choreography. Usually my dancers are far apart from each other. Um, uh, yeah, so mainly my experience with touch has to do with in my teaching and in my therapy with my clients. Um, so dance therapists, we use a lot of touch. We hold hands in a circle. You know, we uh, there's that connection. I remember decades ago, I was doing a dance therapy session on a locked ward, and
Mm-hmm.
the rule was that I had to have one nurse come with me, and uh, you know, they didn't really they didn't really like the dance therapy sessions, but I just remember this one nurse was holding, instead of holding hands with the patient, she was holding him by the wrist, and I just thought that was so uh infantilizing. It wasn't person to person. I mean, whom do you hold by the wrist? A truculent child or something. So I just thought that was strange. But anyway, so um or sometimes I would have the group stand and touch the back of the person in front of them,
Mm-hmm.
uh either in a circle or a straight line, and then the person who was in front, would go to the back, so the person who was in back, who wasn't receiving any touch, would get their turn. But yeah, I just really feel that touch goes to a certain part of the brain,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really important. um to me, there's sort of two kinds of touch, and one touch is a sort of containing, reassuring, uh and the other is more educational. For instance, if I might palpate someone's scapula and have them learn where that is and how it moves. um So, okay, I have another story. So this dance therapist and I had been doing groups for years and years. And do you know what supervision is in therapy? It's okay. So
You can explain, yes.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so there's a group of psychologists or therapists, and once a week we would go to see a woman who would supervise us, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe I would bring up a case or not. It didn't matter. It was very, very helpful to hear other people's cases, and I would bring up my cases too. So then she stopped, and I was looking around for a different supervisor, and I got a woman who was a PhD, and she was a psychologist, and I was telling her about our corner where we would have clients come and sit with us, and they would sit with their back to me, and they would be hugged. So
Mm-hmm.
it was sort of the nurturing corner, we called it. And so I forget, I was bringing up some issue and talking about the nurturing corner, and she says, "What is that?" And I said, "Well, when the clients want to, it's a group of women. When they want to, they come and they sit and they're held to just, for reassurance or calming or whatever." She said, "You must stop that immediately because in Minnesota, anyway, the psychologists have a ruling that it is totally wrong to ever touch your clients, and that and that we were hugging them. She was just beyond the pale for her. So
Mm-hmm.
um I feel this is one of my saddest moments ever. So I told my co-therapist, who is younger than I am, and I was sort of the senior, I said, "Well, we have to stop this right away." So we just went in that night and told the clients that we weren't going to have the nurturing corner anymore. Oh, I just feel that was so stupid, number one, because I sort of believed her. Here she was a PhD and older and blah, and just looking back on it, first of all, we have a different code of ethics as dance therapists. It's fine to touch. I have a lot more to say about that.
Mm-hmm.
She was a verbal therapist, and they didn't even shake hands with their clients, and that I didn't stick up for my profession.
Mm.
That was number one. But number two, I was not. It, we should have just said something like, "Starting in 2 months, we're going to stop the nurturing corner." I shouldn't have abruptly, but she just put the wind up me, as we say. And so, anyway, so I really think touching is fine, but my most important thing is about
Yes.
the intention of the person who is doing the touching. Um, there was a wonderful story that a woman who was talking about incest, I mean, a therapist who dealt a lot with trauma and incest. And she said, so if a father is giving a bath to his young daughter and he starts to feel sexual, then he just stops and goes away. So it has so much to do with what's going on inside the therapist. Um, so I, I mean, I myself, I have really clear boundaries, and I've never had a feeling where I started feeling sexual toward my client. And I feel like that comes across really clearly. I've never had anybody say it was inappropriate, my touch, ever. I have had a client when I was doing these Bartenia fundamentals where, um, my hand is underneath their pelvis and helping them
Mm-hmm.
to uh, articulate how the pelvis works. And she did say, "Oh, I'm starting to feel sexual." Um, so I I I didn't like pull my hands away. I just said, "Well, of course, look at where what we're focusing on, this part of the body where our sexual feelings arise." Um, so that's my big thing about the intention of the therapist. And uh, um, well, I can't read my writing here. Oh, I know
Mm-hmm.
how the baby is held. So uh, if you're a tiny baby and your caregiver is holding you like this, then you're going to learn. We learn through being held as babies how to feel toward our bodies. So if I have a mother or a father or a caregiver who's holding me and they're moving confident with me, I feel, I get the message, oh, I can feel confident in my body. But if there's this nervousness and the caregiver doesn't know how to, then we pick that up also through their touch. So I think that's important.
Mm.
Yeah.
That hadn't occurred to me at all, the importance of like holding types of things also, where we actually like not just touch momentarily and then pull the hands away and go back, but really like hold the person. Do you incorporate these like holding moments also in your workshops where people
Yeah, so the nurturing corner
uh-huh.
was, so I'd sit with my legs open and they come in and they sit with their back to me and I actually hold them for as long as they want. It can be 1 minute or 5 minutes. Yeah.
Mm.
Trying to think of individually, if I'm doing body work. Well, there's the educational part where I'm trying to teach the person, say, how to move from their trochanters. I might touch their trochanters. But I think that's different from a sense of containing, the holding and containing.
Mm. So important that the dimension of time, like how long the hands are, the intent of the hands or the embrace, the whole body that is doing the touching, but also the timing of it, like how long.
Right. And it's like, how long does it take to melt an ice cube? It's like, well, there are a lot of,
I get it.
and everybody has their own amount of time that
Yeah.
feels right.
Yes. And I was, as you were speaking, I was immediately thinking of my recent experiences with like holding, where somebody else is holding some part of my body, and how quickly it felt very healing without
Mm.
any words,
Yes.
and very touching also. It went right to the act of being held went right into my heart also.
Yes. And also how the, like getting a massage,
Yes.
it's like how everybody's hands feel different,
Yes.
on my body.
Yes.
But yes, how sometimes depending on where they're touching, like I think we all have certain points in our bodies that are particularly hungry for touch or
Uh-huh.
healing, and others was like, yeah, that feels nice, but it's not. It doesn't go deeply into my psyche the way other parts do.
Oh, I love this idea. Parts of the body that are hungry for touch.
Mm.
Mm. Yeah.
Mhm.
Now you were starting to speak about the this like inappropriate touch, but in your recent experiences, have there been other moments where you feel like, oh, touching is a sensitive subject? For example, during the COVID or even after the COVID experience, where people just feel like touching is somehow in general not okay, or I have had clients who are very sensitive and they just don't want anybody to touch them,
Right,
even if it's done with a healing intent. It's like no touch. Do you have any stories
right.
about that
So
also?
in therapy, we would call that tactile defensive, right?
Oh, tell us
That they
about that.
well, it's just
That means.
they touch is not pleasant for them. It's either traumatic or they're wired. I mean, sometimes they're you know uh, extremely sensitive humans, and like there are people that are just so sensitive in hearing, but then
Yes,
there are people who are so sensitive to touch it's almost painful to be touched.
yes.
So yeah, uh, I don't pretend to understand that wiring in the brain, why some
Mm-hmm.
individuals are like that, but I know that they are. Yeah.
And you know, when we are talking about touching here, somehow the first image that comes to mind is that of like hand to hand or like the whole body embracing, but one could also touch. I could touch you with my shoulder or with my back, or yes, so the different parts of the body getting in contact, like in contact improvisation, for example.
Absolutely. And you remember, what was it the elbow? What did we do during COVID where you weren't supposed to touch, but you could
Yeah,
touch
the elbow.
elbows?
Yes, the
Yeah,
elbow. Hello.
yeah, yeah. So the
Yes.
elbow bump. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
We've been talking about touch as one person touching another, but do you also use like self touch in your movement and healing practices or in your own life, also, for example? Is touching oneself also one way to learn or connect or to oneself?
Mm. Well, I love the touching the heart,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then it's like, well, all right, do they want me to touch my right? Which hand goes first? Because that feels different to me. Um,
Oh, is there a meaning?
yeah. I don't know. I just know it feels different, and I'm sure there's somebody at somewhere has a meaning. Yeah. Um, 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 and I do these tapping. I do this whole series of self-touch exercises every morning that has to do with that it's good for the brain, and it's supposed to bring up the feeling of positivity in the body. So it's like, oh yeah, if that helps bring up my mood, so I do that every morning. It just takes about 3 or 4 minutes. And the woman whose exercise I follow are okay, just a minute. It's not coming up on my internal computer screen, but it will in a minute. Okay. So yeah, and then sometimes like I have this chronic cough, and then sometimes if I just touch myself, that'll help me stop coughing. Now, what that's about, I don't know, but anyway,
Mm-hmm. Do
so
you want to tell us, because I know you are involved in experiential anatomy also. You use a lot of that
yeah.
to teach people about anatomy. Would you could you tell the listeners what is experiential anatomy and how is touch used there?
Uh, um, so anatomy, and sometimes I call it sacred anatomy,
Hmm.
is so, I think our bodies are so amazing in their design. Um,
Yes. I don't know why I put this. Wait a
I
second.
agree. I agree that it's a good thumbs up.
Overhand.
Okay. Yeah.
That was accident.
Uh, um, just so I feel like the more we know about how our bodies move, like that they're four ball and socket joints, or how the spine includes the neck. It's not just the spine, and then this neck is different. It's how we perceive the movements of our bodies can help us be more articulate in our movements.
Mhm.
And then the more articulate we can be, I feel like the more polished our tool is. Like to me, the body is the tool uh, for being alive. I mean, if life were a chess game, my body would be a chess piece, and how I move it, it's like if I want to get close to you, or I want to get distant to you, or I want to turn away, or I want to open up to you. There are all these things that the body is our play piece. I don't mean to demean it, but
Mhm.
the body is our tool. And all the studies show, I mean, I could say like, oh, Hiie, I'd like to get to know you better, but you you don't listen to my words, you listen, you see my nonverbal
Yes.
communication, and that speaks much louder. So the body as a communication tool is an important part of my work. So the experiential anatomy is simply learning learning about how the bones work in relation to each other, or the muscles work, and then to take that awareness and then have to move from the awareness of the body and how the body is moving, creates for me a very deep level of movement where
Mm.
even if I'm trying to emulate a dance teacher, you know, in a movement she's doing, if I can feel, if I have the patterns where I know what's happening inside my body, I feel it a lot more deeply.
Mm. And do you use touch in how you teach experiential anatomy?
Oh yes, absolutely. Not all the times, but most of the time, I think palpating, for instance, uh, focusing on the shoulder blades, which we could spend hours on. But
Mm-hmm.
yes, it's important to be aware of the movement, and it's best to do with a partner, where the partner is touching that lower border, that lower angle of the scapula, and how it excursions around the rib cage. It's much easier to have someone, it's like, oh gosh, it moves like from there to there. It's so that the external touch is kind of a pointer
Yes.
toward an experience that I'm hoping each mover will receive.
Yes. It's like
Yeah,
through somebody's hands or touch, it's much easier to envision these parts of our anatomy also that we can't, like, I can't see my shoulder blades, but if somebody touches,
yeah,
then I can see with my inner eye what is happening in that part of the body.
exactly, exactly. Yeah. Hmm.
Have you had some examples? Do you have any examples of a transformative or healing effect that a certain exercise with touch has evoked? I mean, either you or your students, participants.
Yes, well, I will reiterate the exercise that we did recently,
Yes.
um, where um, in this case, we went from the anatomy of the back and the spinal cord receiving data. Excuse me, that the data from the body to the brain comes in through the back of the spinal cord. So
Mm-hmm.
we had been studying that, and then the whole concept of receiving from the back. When I think of that, I don't have to have anybody touch me necessarily, but then I feel, I guess I imagine being touched from behind, and it's a different level of awareness. It's like the whole back of my body, or especially my spine. So I was with a group of women, and at the end of this experiential anatomy, we had one person stand, and then the rest of the 11 of us would touched her back. And then the people who were touching would breathe together. I would lead that. We would in, and the person who was being touched was just instructed to just receive as much as they could. And it was very touching. Um, it, it was very important. And for some of the women, um, just it brought them to tears, because they were so used to taking charge and
Mm-hmm.
not receiving in such a very safe. Not only was it safe, but the whole group, each so each of us had at least one hand on her back, and it was warm, and it was loving, and it was that sense of being contained, and receiving, which was beautiful. So
Yes, I heard now two people commenting upon this exercise. Our mutual friend and colleague Wendy, she mentioned that there was this, it was really a wow experience for her. She felt like there was so much support that she was receiving through these individual hands of different people. She felt like, she said that she felt like there was like a group of people with her, behind her, supporting her, leading her, you know. So it was really, I
yes, and
remember. Mhm.
go ahead, go ahead.
From my one of the examples that comes to my mind doesn't actually involve hands at all. I remember I was doing a retreat in the practice called Surya Soul, which is like a dance, improvisational, slightly sometimes choreographed dance practice. And there was one moment during the end of the retreat where we were just sitting with the partner back to back. And my
Yeah.
partner was actually one of the teachers, a man, and we were just gently swaying side to side. And I remember how much support and wisdom and strength I received actually from this person's back. And I
Mm.
felt like it was a different kind of communication and very empowering actually. And I was like,
Oh, I love that you brought that up. It's like, oh yeah, we do that a lot in dance therapy. I
uh-huh,
mean, where you sit back to back,
yes,
and you can do different movements, like as you said, the side.
yeah,
Sometimes I could lean over and the other person leans back. You
yes,
know, there's that. Do you understand what I'm saying?
yes, yes, yes,
Yeah. Um, but mainly just the sense of support, like just
yes.
taking in that connection through a whole back. My mentor, Irmgard Vartaniev, used to talk about how how wonderful it used to be when they would have grandparents living with the family, you know, multiple generations, and that the child would sit on the grandparents' lap. Just that that was the whole thing. And what was happening is that there was a sense of strength and self-confidence that came from having the back and the back of the legs connecting with another human who was loving. Um, again, is that there might not have even been a specific intention, but most grandparents just love their grandchildren anyway, you know. And that how she, so my teacher was saying how it's a little sad that there isn't so much of that sitting in a lap, you know, like we have the perambulators and the walkers, and it's like I don't think children are held and touched as much as they used to be, say, 100 years ago.
Hmm, I see. Yes, I've been reading about the wisdom of the skin, and
Ooh,
so I'm like a very strong supporter of like auto massage, self massage, touching, honoring the skin. And I
yeah.
had a recent experience also where somebody was giving me a little head massage, and that just that touch, I realized there was so much trauma inside of me. I burst out crying. And I
Uh-huh.
was very emotional. There's It's very interesting how touching evokes the emotions so quickly, also goes right into some kind of an emotional center.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love that story. I remember the very first time I was in my 20s, there was a visitor from Mississippi, and
Uh-huh.
he did this, you know, like just sort of scrubbing my scalp with
Yeah.
the touch. And I was like, wow, I've never had that ever, you know.
Love the gesture.
I mean, just I'm just thinking of like, well, shampooing, you know, it was never like that. Um, and it was felt just wonderful. So I'm not surprised that that
Yes.
your scalp massage touched you, you know, in a releasing. I feel like the skin helps us release emotions, you know,
Yes.
when we're touched. Like the other week, I was getting a massage, and I was lying on my stomach, and the the massage, that it was between my shoulder blades, which is where I'm hungry for touch back there, but just pulling them, sideways, pulling the
Mhm.
energy sideways. And it was a weeper.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Me too. I've had one of those, and it's interesting now that I listen to you and I think a little bit about my experiences with healing touch. My strongest experiences with touch that have been really emotional have occurred during moments where I wasn't actually expecting to receive any touch. Like it
Mm.
just, I was there present, and then this magic holding or touching happened. That was very transformative. But when
Yeah.
you go into the experience, like, okay, now I'm gonna feel this, it's different.
Right, right. It's
Absolutely.
I agree. It's surprising. This isn't about touch exactly, but one of my first classes I was teaching at the University of Minnesota in the Bartenia fundamentals, and we were doing these arm circles,
Yes.
which doesn't involve self-touch, but it's you're really paying attention to what's happening with the arm. And this young woman just burst into tears. She was like, "Oh, I'm remembering a car accident that I was in like 12 years ago." And um, the whole thing about the memories are stored in the muscle.
Yes.
That's what Piaget was saying. But I'm wondering if there aren't, if the skin isn't somehow the conductor for the muscles underneath, like you're being touched on your. I'm wondering about if the skin doesn't have some memory also.
Yes. I think in my experience, I feel like, especially when I need to find something out about the other person. Like,
Yeah.
are we a good match, or do I
Yeah.
want to spend some time with this person? I feel like my skin tells me things.
Oh,
And
I
like,
love that.
do I want to receive this person's touch? I take it in through the skin, not so much like through the muscles or the bones or other parts,
Yeah.
but the skin responds somehow. So I'm like, okay,
No, I think
listen to the
that's
skin.
amazing. I love that. Yeah. And then, the skin has a lot of fascia in it. So I'm wondering about the fascia. Irmgard Bartenia would also talk about the fascia and how if you do something in your little finger, it affects it in your toe. And she was she was ahead of her time in terms of the importance of the fascia.
Yes.
Yeah, but I'm wondering about that too. So I'm curious about your skin, your reading about the skin and
Mhm.
its messages.
Yes, maybe that's a different, now that I think about it, maybe that's a different interview. The skin, a
Yeah,
different topic actually to
right, right.
what else did I want to ask you?
But the skin is you can't have touch without the skin.
Yes,
So,
yes. Well,
but
the
yeah.
book that I was reading also went into what is it that humans do with the skin, and how actually skin is what makes us human,
Mm,
and race and different and health, and how we modify and tattoos and things like this with the skin. So
mm.
it's more like a cultural study of different aspects of
Ah, I see. Yeah,
skin,
yeah.
and um, how human identity. Well, one of the points that the author was making was also that actually our sense of self, how our identity is in the skin. He
Oh,
said, was it a he or she? The author said that if we take the skin away from the human body, that the way in which we understand what a human is actually disappears very
mm.
quickly. Like if we just see the muscles or the tissues or the bones, it's the skin is what makes us who we are. Basically, was the point. One of the points.
I could see that. Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense to me. Yeah.
Let me see. Maybe one way to end this fascinating discussion. Imagine uh, s- maybe there's somebody listening to this interview and they are eager to incorporate touch into their movement practice or just into their daily lives. What would you recommend them do? I know you mentioned that the tapping, you can talk about that, or maybe there's another, or the holding of the hands of the over the heart we did also.
Hmm.
What else? Or maybe one of those
Oh,
would come.
so Another wise person talked about just giving yourself a hug. And then, yeah, and then just holding that, and then change which arm is in front. But don't do it that quickly, you know, take a
Yeah.
while, and just give yourself a hug and just feel like, oh, I'm accepting myself just the way I am. So there are those. The there are there's exercise of putting lotion all over your body, and while you do it, that you like on starting, you know, with your foot and coming up your shin and then up your thigh, and just touching and caring for the skin all over is such a great way to sort of go, hi body, I'm here with
Yeah.
you, I care about you, I'm sending you my loving intentions. So there's that. And then if you're if you're really brave,
Yes.
you could do that in front of a full-length mirror when you're nude.
Oh, that's great. That's a great idea.
Yeah, and just being with your body visually also when tactile. Yeah.
Oh, I love this idea. As I was listening to you, I also remembered something that Wendy Morel, our mutual colleague and friend, who is also the director, the president of Sacred Dance Guild, uh, she she does this. It's like a daily practice of like brushing the skin. No,
Oh,
like do you know about this? No? Like
please
during
go
some
ahead.
of the
Please go
meetings,
ahead.
she does that sometimes, like as a way to begin like a meeting, for example. She's like, let's brush the arm and then the other arm and then the
Yeah.
yes.
Yes. Oh, well, and then there's I'm going to take my glasses off. Then there's the one that's good for the vagus nerve, where you start with the opposite hand on the opposite eyebrow, and you go down, you press down past the ear, press hard, down, down the neck, and then down and up the arm. And then the other one. It feels so good.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Then a wise person told me just last week. He said, you pick up other people's energy, you know, like too much. So you should clean yourself every day. And he said you could do it with a feather, you know, or just your hand, just your hands, but to clean off your, you know, clean off your energy. So it's like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great idea, especially for people who work a lot with clients and angry clients and or
Yeah.
just as a way to end the day, yes, to return to oneself. I think it's a great idea.
Yes, exactly. So that's very important.
Well, I believe that gave us a lot of ideas. We put all of these into practice.
Yes, every single one of them. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there
Yeah.
anything else you want to add that I didn't ask
Um,
you about?
uh, I remember getting a healing from this was I wrote in this was many years ago. I was in a dance troupe, and we came back home on a bus that had a lot of uh, uh, exhaust actually coming into the bus that we sort of didn't know about. So we all felt sort of sick. And I went to this health place, and this woman uh, did a very slow massage just along my large intestine. You know, so starting at the ileocecal valve, and then she would have I would inhale, and then on the exhale she would spiral down and hold it, and then move up an inch. And I do that to myself sometimes too, just to help with my digestion, or just
Where
um,
does it go? Where do I start?
you start at the right side, on the lower right side. There you go. That's that right side. Yeah. I'm going to
We need a demonstration.
show. So I start here. So I have a yoga teacher who just does this.
Mm.
He just says, just And that feels really nice.
Yes.
The massage would just start here and circle. I'm
Uh-huh.
doing it fast motion. Spiral, spiral, and then along here, 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 all the way down. And but it's almost like you're I mean, that's going to the organs underneath the skin. But if we just stuck with the skin, it doesn't matter. I could just be really loving to my knee or my foot or my thigh or my low back. Um, it's just giving the body, the skin, the message that I'm here,
Mhm.
I support you, I accept you, I love you. And the body just goes, ooh, thank you.
Yes.
It's because sometimes I like to say this, we are like God to our body. And by that, I don't mean we have superpowers. Well, we might, but I mean, if I just ate ice cream for a week and that's all I put in my body instead of taking, better care of my health. And then I said, I now run as fast as you can. It would still do its best to do what I wanted. So we have such power over our bodies. Now, our bodies, as we know, our bodies can come back and have power over us for sure with aches and pains or illness or, whatever. But just to try to have a loving relationship with our bodies. And if just through our skin can receive the message of acceptance from our hands.
Our skin can receive the message of acceptance through our hands. That is a beautiful way to end. Marylee, thank you so much. Now, how can people, if listeners are interested in asking you some questions or working with you or looking at your work, where can they find you? How can they find you?
Okay, so my work, which is more about my choreography rather than my well, there's a little therapeutic stuff in there. My website is global site site performance.org. And the best way to get in touch with me would be through my email, which is director.gsp@gmail.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So this was Hiie Saumaa from Paris, New York, and Marylee Hardenbergh from Minnesota, Minneapolis. And stay tuned for future discussions.
So please stop the recording. I have a question to ask you.
Mhm.